Hello, and welcome back to Eric McElroy's American Exchange with me, Eric McElroy. It's in the name. And this is an American Exchange where, as someone based in the UK, as an American for the last 23 and a half years, I dial across the pond to find out what is happening in my home country, because it is getting cray-cray over there. This week, we're rejoined by Sam Walker, who's a radio presenter, broadcaster, and a Brit who's gone the other way. She's living in Arizona and maybe getting slightly better weather than I'm getting here in the UK, but more guns, that's the trade-off. That's the only way to do it. If you want to live with guns, if you want nice weather, that's what you have to do. It was great to have Sam back on because while she can't vote yet, she is obviously a keen politico, keeping an eye on things. She's there. She's on track to become a U.S. citizen. She's raising her family in the U.S., and she's in Arizona, which is right in the thick of the political discussion this year. They've got border issues happening there. They've got Carrie Lake, the mad woman who ran for governor and is now likely to run for Senate. And she's there on the cusp of seeing what the vibe is with the people that she talks to on a daily basis. So that's exactly what this podcast is about, is me trying to find out what is happening back in the States. So make sure to check out Sam Walker. We'll give more details about her after the podcast, of course. She's on Instagram and has her own fantastic podcast about her journey to America called Sam Walker's Desert Diaries. And I've kind of done the plugs for her already, so check her out as well. And yeah, please enjoy Sam Walker. I'm very excited to welcome back to the podcast Sam Walker, who is a Brit who's gone to the US. I think it's an exchange program. We swapped lives.
We did. You're enjoying the delights of Kingston. I'm enjoying the delights of Arizona. Yeah.
Exactly. I think you're getting a little bit better on the weather than I am. The last time we talked, you were approximately, I think, 4 years and 3 days out from getting your US citizenship. How's that countdown going, or are you having second thoughts?
No, I'm now less than 3 years out. So we got our permanent residency in January 2022. So
Brilliant.
I've got 5 years to wait until I can become a citizen, which I am still absolutely planning to do.
Okay.
Lord help me. Mainly so I can vote.
Yeah.
And also, so, just having that flexibility, I think, as our world seems to sort of contract, especially you guys in England have, of course, really experienced this with Brexit, but as our worlds contract as well, having kids, I've got 2 daughters, I'm thinking I'd like to give them the opportunity to work where they want to work and live where they want to work as much as you can. Who knows? The world's changing so rapidly as we speak that who knows about the future, but the plan would be that, yeah, if they want to go back to England for a few years, not going to have to give up any green card. If they want to stay here, so it's giving them options essentially. So that's the plan, but the best laid plans, Eric, who knows?
Yeah, I remember when I planned on giving my kids a European passport. But
yeah, I remember that as well.
Those are good times. Good times. But it's blue again, so that's the compromise.
Well, there you go. It's all worth it. It's all worth it.
So, and if anybody in America is listening, they're like, what are you talking about? Apparently, the reason why the UK left the EU was because the color of the passports was burgundy, and that was against God and the Queen. I think that was basically the message of Brexit.
I think that was essentially, right? And to get our country back. Of course, that was the phrase that everyone spouted. Get our country back. How's that going? Sorry. Yeah.
Well, that's a different podcast.
It really is. I don't want to cry.
So there's a lot happening because you're in Arizona, which is surprise. I mean, I would have, coming from the US, I think, things don't really happen in Arizona, but that's actually not true anymore. You're quite close to an American institution, which has become a global institution, and we are recording this before it happens. And that is, of course, the event where Taylor Swift is going to pop in. Oh, it's also called the Super Bowl. So how are you excited? Have you bought into the whole Super Bowl religion? Since you've been there for a few years
Not
now?
really, because the Super Bowl was here in Phoenix, of course, last year. I was most excited sitting on my couch to realize Paul McCartney was only a few miles down the road from me. I did reach out to him on Instagram and say if he wanted to come around for a cup of proper, British tea, but he didn't. But yes, Taylor Swift also started her Eras tour here in Phoenix, Arizona last year. So she's got a bit of connection with the city. But no, I mean, I think the first couple of years I was here, I remember sitting out in my yard in the first house we lived in and hearing sort of these shouts and screams coming from a nearby house and going, what's everyone shouting? And then realizing, oh, it's the Super Bowl. I have in recent years been to a couple of Super Bowl parties and have been you know, they've been fun. I've been the person going, what's that? Why do they keep stopping? What's going on? But I do enjoy the halftime show. That's always
Mm,
been, you know, I really enjoyed Rihanna last year. I thought she was amazing. You know, what a badass being quite heavily pregnant on platforms that were raising around the whole stadium. As Usher, of course, this year, which comes with great disappointment to
mm,
all the right-wing conspiracy theorists who believe that Taylor Swift was, of course, going to magically pop up and do the halftime show,
yeah.
despite the fact that Usher had already been announced. Because Taylor, of course, and her boyfriend, footballer Travis Kelce, who, of course, he's in the Super Bowl, he's Kansas City Chiefs. Um, they are both it's a psyops, of course. They are both
Yeah.
agents working undercover for the Biden
Of course.
administration and the swamp in Washington in order to indoctrinate the young minds of America. And if you didn't realize that, then where have you been hiding? Because obviously that's what's going on, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely one thing we are missing in the UK is that level of conspiracy theory
Yeah.
connecting political events with sporting events. I think I mean, that's a trick that because a lot of things that start in the US migrate over this way. But I mean, this one is truly bonkers. And we talked about it last week
Yeah.
on the podcast with Reed Galen. And that this is something that's getting genuine coverage on the
Oh,
sort of semi-legitimate mainstream news channels that are out there. This isn't
100%.
just fringe stuff.
No, absolutely not. I mean, yes, I mean, you can kind of look at a lot of the quote right wing commentators and think, well, I've never heard of them. But then you look and they have got millions of subscribers
Yeah.
on YouTube and other more sort of right wing video platforms, places like Rumble. And you kind of go, well, they don't count because they're not the mainstream media. They're not the Tucker Carlsons of the world. He's too busy cozying up with Putin, of course. But
Yeah.
you know, you look at and then you go, hang on, these people have got huge, huge influence. And but then you look at Vivek Ramaswamy, who of course is a failed Republican nominee. He came out last week saying that you know he now is convinced the Super Bowl is fixed, convinced that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to win because then Taylor will appear on the sidelines as Travis there raises the Super Bowl, and they will both come out for Biden and influence and indoctrinate those young minds across America. And this was someone who was a quote a serious, and I'm using air quotes, serious politician is
Yeah.
coming out with this. We've got you know, most of the anchors on Fox News have come out and said, you know, we need to be very, very careful because Taylor is, you know, now represents everything that is wrong with America. One of
Yeah.
them said last week. And what I find extraordinary, Eric, is you know, Taylor Swift is a Christian.
Mm.
She has talked openly about her Christianity. She's a white, good-looking, blonde Christian American, which for a lot of the horrible outer fringes of the right wing is exactly who you'd think would be their hero.
Yeah.
Travis also has said he is a Christian. And so when the far right are attacking, or the not so far right are attacking the white Christians of America for being left wing undercover psyops, you got to think there's a whole new crate of Kool-Aid that's been delivered that everyone seems to have drunk.
But I mean, if anything, that makes her more of a heretic to them because, firstly, first the thing that she's done wrong is she's a woman. That's
Oh,
problematic.
well, and
Um,
has a
and
sort of has a mouth as well and
and
speaks.
has a
That's the real problem. Yeah.
has power, which is
Oh,
problematic,
yeah.
and then now has a view that she's come to on her own and decided to because you know if she was speaking on behalf of Donald Trump, they would be all over her.
Oh my
But
gosh,
now that
yes.
you know, but they've got Kid Rock on their side, which you know, again, if I don't know if we know Kid Rock in the UK, but I mean the if you don't Google him. It's not really worth it. But
Don't.
I mean the parity between what Taylor Swift is and what any media person they've got John Voight was someone that one of the right wing mediators was like, well, I mean, as an actor, I love John Voight. He's
He
been
was,
in
I
some
mean,
amazing
Midnight
films,
Cowboy, what a
but
great, great movie. Wonderful.
but if you go on his Twitter feed now, it's batshit crazy. I mean,
Oh,
he has
yeah.
gone full just yeah. But so I think that's probably what angers them the most is this is a powerful woman who's owning her own voice. And you know, I saw an article, I don't know where it was, but her last she's booked some concerts in Florida right before the election. And people are worried that her influence is so powerful that she could swing Florida towards the Democrats. I mean, that is a tremendous amount of power. That is
It is.
insane.
And let's not forget that a couple of years ago, oh no, it's actually last year on sort of National Voter Registration Day.
Mm,
She actually went onto an Instagram story and urged everyone to register to vote. And there was a
yep.
surge that day of 35,000 extra voters who
Yeah.
registered that day. And that's the sort of power she has. And it must be absolutely terrifying. I mean, she won, of course, at the Grammys. She won 2 Grammys last weekend. And I mean, my gosh, the hate that came out for her after that people just are losing their minds over the fact that here is this incredibly powerful woman who is also winning record amounts of Grammys.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, the conspiracists were saying this is it. If she wins at the Grammys, she's going to get off stage. She's going to come out for Biden. She's going to trash Trump. Of course, she didn't say a word. She talked about her music.
Yeah.
She talked about raising up other women as well, which irked a lot of people. But the fact she didn't fawn over Celine Dion meant that that's all anyone talked about for the next few days. So I'm astounded at the influence that she has, but in a positive way. I mean, anyone who wants to think about the influence that Taylor Swift has, look at what she has done in every single town or city she has visited in her tour. She has donated tens of thousands of dollars to local causes. And in fact, watching the Grammys last weekend, Trevor Noah brilliantly hosted, and Taylor Swift actually came in a little bit late. He'd already started his opening monologue, and as she walked in, swept through the room of the Grammys, he went, "Oh my gosh, look as Taylor as she passes every single table, the local economies of that table are just growing and swelling." And it was just like, yeah, this is happening. It's real, you know.
It's insane. But it'll be interesting to see because this will come out after the Super Bowl. So after she has revealed herself as the true Satan of the Democrats at the halftime show. So we'll have to see if there's a world left at that stage. But my guess
who
is there
knows?
won't
This
be.
may be for naught. Yeah, we may be talking to just a pile of rubble.
But yeah, or if her flight gets delayed from Japan, I can't believe I know what her travel plans are, or that, the Kansas City Chiefs lose, which is the team her boyfriend is on, then the Republicans will be saying it was God's, who knows what they'll be saying. But yeah, we'll have to watch and see what
We know though,
happens there.
whatever happens, it will fit their narrative.
Oh, of course.
Whatever happens, if they win, if they lose, if she comes out, if she doesn't, it'll fit their narrative.
We see what you're quickly learning, Sam, is that reality and America do not necessarily always go together. And this is what makes it beautiful. So one of the things the reason I started this podcast is because I've been gone for so long, and getting a sense of what's happening. Because I'm a geek, I read all the political news, but I'm obviously watching that from afar. One of the things that the Republicans have been banging on and on about is the border for years. Now, apparently the border crisis has gotten so serious that like some of the people I've been talking to on the podcast have been saying if the election were held today, Biden would lose because of the border. Then we had a border bill that came into the Senate last week that was negotiated pretty much a very not far right, but rightish compromise bill because of split government in America.
Bipartisan, yeah.
Republican led, and then sabotaged by the Republicans who've been saying that the border is in crisis. So you're in a border state, Arizona. So what is the reality? You've been there for 5 years now. Do you think there is a real border crisis happening that you can see close up? And what do you think is going to be the impact of this sabotage of their own bill?
I mean, I am very happy to say I am not an expert on the border, and I think it's very easy for people to.
That doesn't stop people from saying things.
This is what I was about to say. So it's I'm very happy to say, much like if whenever I talk about Israel and Gaza, I'm like, I would like to point out, I don't feel I need to have an opinion on this in the terms of everyone else feels they need to have an opinion. I am here. So yeah, absolutely. I don't want to stand and say there's no border crisis. Nothing's because I'm in Phoenix. I'm a few hundred miles from the border. I'm not there every day. I don't feel I've gathered enough personal evidence to have a personal opinion on what is happening in the border. I will say there are clearly issues. Anyone will admit that. We know that there's up to 10,000 people a day coming into the United States. It's a big border as well. This is absolutely not just in Arizona. I listen to a couple of local news stations. One I listen to fairly regularly, which seems to be as level as you could possibly get here in Arizona and in the United States. Some I listen to that have, it's just all a fan base for Donald Trump. But we know that there is an issue. We know that. We know that there actually, if you want to look at the bigger picture, is a massive issue with the fact that why are so many people traveling to a country that's very clearly fucked up and they're not going to have a very good life here. If you haven't got health insurance, you haven't got a good place to live. I mean, it's really expensive to live here. The cost of living is through the roof. How desperate do you have to be, right? To try and travel. I know somebody who's a friend of mine who actually served in Iraq. He's a young man. He's still he's in his late 20s now. He served in Iraq. Okay. He was in the Marines. He also entered the USA illegally when he was 3 years old because he and his family lived in an area in Mexico where they were avocado farmers, and it had got so bad with local criminal gangs that his father turned around to his mother and 3 of the 4 children said, "You've got to get out of here. We're going to die.
Yeah.
We're going to die." And his mother took her 3 youngest children, because the older one was kind of old enough to stay with the father, and he said, "I want to stay with dad and kind of keep the farm going." And they traveled and crossed the border illegally into Arizona. And to hear him talk about the sheer desperation that his mother had, and to hear his story is just extraordinary. They then obviously went on to become citizens. He served his country. He went to Iraq and served in the war and saw people close to him killed. And I mean, my gosh, he's an amazing, amazing young man. And hearing stories like his, I'm always very skeptical when they're all just coming in to take our jobs. What jobs are they then? I mean, it's the same story for immigration all across the world. There is nothing new there. And I feel like living in Arizona, you kind of almost on this sort of weird roulette wheel of what are you going to get when you sit down and start talking to a stranger in a bar. And I went out recently to a friend's birthday party and started chatting to a really nice couple. We were chatting away, getting on, and he was Irish, she's American, and talking about their niece who was coming, and they said, "How did you get to America, and how did you, the process?" And I was talking about how difficult it is to get a work visa and then get a green card, and it's incredibly expensive, and it's laborious, and it's so strict and stringent. And as someone who had, credentials that the United States were looking for, it was still incredibly challenging. And of course, that was it. It was like the blue touch. But they're Biden's letting these thousands of people in every day, giving them mobile phones, giving them somewhere to live. And I was like, do you really believe that? Do you really, truly believe that? And they do, because they watch, certain news channels, and that's what they believe. And I said, well, I can't imagine it's a very nice life. What are they running from if they're moving to a country where they don't have basic health care of any form? They don't really have good quality housing. They're away from their family, but again, this narrative doesn't really fit in. They then went on, and I'm not exaggerating when I say they then went on to show me a picture of their 16-year-old son with absolute pride at the March for Life the week before. And that,
which is
the March for Life, if you don't know, is a quote.
Group.
Yeah, thank you for calling it that. They're not a pro-life group, because there's nothing pro-life about it. But a 16-year-old boy, what 16-year-old boy travels halfway across the country to go and march against women? And that's not a normal thing for a 16-year-old boy to want to do, right? But they were incredibly proud of this. So I felt that we weren't probably going to be good friends. But the reason I tell you this is the fact that there is so much belief without any understanding. So yes, I'm not going to stand here and say to you, oh, there's no border crisis. I have seen the videos of the Trump supporting wagons of people heading down to the border in Texas to go and confront the thousands of immigrants pouring over, and there was no one there. We've all seen those videos, and people going and ready for a fight, and there's nothing really happening. But I think it would be naive to say, oh, it's all hunky-dory, it's all smoke and mirrors, there's no problem there whatsoever. I think what is absolutely crucial to understand is that you are right. This bipartisan bill was drawn up, and senior Republicans have openly said in an open stage, we don't want to fix this issue before the election, because if we fix it, Trump's knackered. So we're going to and they've said this openly. We don't want the border crisis to go away. We want to keep stoking the fire and fanning the flames and making out it's terrible, because this is probably our only chance of getting back in.
Yeah.
In what way does that support the American people?
But that's not the core issue here. We've got the Republican Party is driven by the desire to keep Trump out of jail. That's that is the philosophy of the Republican Party. From what I can see from here, because if he's president, it's much less likely that he'll be incarcerated for one of the 91, felony charges against him, which is.
But this is what really could keep me awake at night. Why? What is the motivation to keep a criminal from facing justice? I don't understand. They have plenty of other lesser demons circling around that they quite could have easily have thrown their support behind. But they choose a man who has not lied about the sort of person he is. He has
Yeah.
not hidden the sort of person he is. He's not some mastermind who's like, wow, we had no idea he was like this. He's been very open and honest about the sort of nefarious piece of shit that he is, and yet they still support him and sort of genuflect. This is
I
one
mean, I
of
think
those
the
feelings
first
like,
wave of people that supported him were like the Chris Christies, who thought, well, if I can kind of control him, get what I want, get the justices I want in the Supreme Court to take away abortion, which they achieved. And so they give him credit for that. And then but there was that wave of people,
the
will manage
irony.
this guy.
Yeah, man is
Now
probably
we're at the
paid for
wave
more.
that
Yeah.
those people who have turned against him, they've seen the one thing that they want, many of them, is power. And everyone who's turned against him has lost power. People who openly now are campaigning against him, people who just tried to stand up to him and then have taken. So the only way to maintain power in the Republican Party is to be supplicant to Trump.
But,
And
let's not
it's
forget the
madness.
midterms. Let's not forget the midterms, because pretty much every Trump puppet who was installed, every one of the
Yeah.
sort of swivel-eyed loons, as I called them, they pretty much failed across the board. Here in
Yeah.
Arizona, Carrie Lake did not become senator. Oh, sorry, she did. The election was stolen. The attorney general candidate who was put in here, virtually every candidate who was put in who was on that pro-Trump ticket did not succeed. But you're right, for every one of those, there is a Liz Cheney whose career has fallen apart because they dared to stand up and speak the truth.
Yeah, but I mean, you're right. I mean, that's the thing. The things that would normally take a politician down just don't, because I guess because of the lock that Trump has on the base, because they're so um, separated from reality because of the right-wing news and the people who say, well, I just believe Trump. And if you present them with facts, they're like, well, I've never even heard those things. So I think if you want power, I mean, one of the most craven politicians that exist in the US Senate is Lindsey Graham, who used to be best friends with John McCain, who was the
Yeah.
archetype of, well, he was the senator from Arizona, and he was, Reagan Republican-esque, middle of the road, would stand up for what he believed in occasionally against the party, against the party at times, saved Obamacare essentially. And Lindsey Graham was right there, his best mate. Donald Trump gets power, he turns against his lifelong friend, John McCain, and then sucks up to Donald Trump, even though Trump ridiculed him left, right, and center. It's just, that's power. I mean, that seems like the only thing that is left because he's got the
I
base.
don't
What
know.
else
I
is
mean,
there?
I don't disagree with you, but I also really struggle to understand where this comes from. I suppose I'm an optimist. I'm naive, whatever phrase you want to use. I'd probably agree with all of them.
Yeah.
But I I really struggle to believe that people are so motivated by something that's so ultimately unfulfilling, and that there are so many of them. I'm not suggesting there aren't
Yeah.
people in the world who are messed up in many ways and do crave that, but to kind of say all the Republican Party are just drunk on power and don't care about values and morals and the good of American people just seems a bit reductionist. And I struggle that I do struggle with what is the answer then? I don't know,
Yeah.
because it seems to be. I mean, I know that Philip, I can never say his surname. You know exactly who I mean.
Ron
Ron
Filipowski.
Filipowski,
Yeah.
who's sort of the editor-in-chief of Midas Touch, which is a news, kind of a left-wing news network here in the US. He always says it's a cult. It's a
Yeah.
cult. And that's really the only way to look at it, that these people are blinded by something. I don't know what, because you're also completely correct that you can present the facts. But let's not forget when Donald Trump, before he was actually on the main political stage, was talking about Barack Obama and saying, he wasn't born here in the States, he shouldn't be president, he was born in
Yeah.
Kenya, and this nonsense birthist theory. And eventually Barack Obama came out and did present his birth certificate showing that he was born in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And everybody turned around. Well, everybody, that faction of the party turned around the Republican Party and said, "Oh no, look, it's not the full certificate; it's only the partial certificate. That's not the real." And so I'm in Obama's book. He talks about turning around to his chief advisor and saying, "Well, look, I'll just go and get the full one. Then I just gave that one because it's the one I happen to have at hand, but I'll go and get the other one." And his advisor said, "Don't bother. Don't bother, because it doesn't matter. You can show them all the evidence you want, but it doesn't fit the narrative. So you're wasting your time. You are playing chess with a pigeon here." And that's the only way to think about it. You're there strategizing and they're just like, what is the brilliant phrase? Just kind of knocking the pieces over and pooping all over the board. I mean, that's what you're dealing with. You can't have any sort of logical conversation with people whose who are not based in any form of logic or fact or reason.
And once again, this is the country that you've emigrated to and
I
you're
know.
looking to get a passport for, just to point that out.
Well, I'll just say Rishi Sunak back to you. And oh my gosh, I mean, let's see. Yeah.
No, he's doing great over here. I think one thing that's interesting. So I'm going to pick on you a little bit here.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that, Sam. Just to make a broader point, but you'll quickly see what I'm doing. So you mentioned Carrie Lake, who
Yeah.
ran. Now you said that she ran for senator, but she's running for senator now. So you made a mistake.
Oh, sorry, governor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what that mistake proves, if you misspeak just a little bit, that you are not fit to be president of the United States, that you are losing your mind, that you're senile, and
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what else you do. We should just remove you from high office because you misspoke once in a rather coherent argument that you were making about other things.
You're right.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Got to go now. You've got to stop everything. So, of course, what I'm talking about is the fact that Biden, who's much older than you are, but has occasionally misspoken, and now people are turning that into he shouldn't be president. And the guy who should is the guy who has 91 criminal indictments and has been found to be sexual assaulted a woman and so on. So, I mean, it's insane, isn't it? In that narrative that, I mean, the people that you're talking to, because I talk to a lot of people about Biden and average people who don't follow it. And I can make the argument that he's done a lot of accomplishments, that yes, he's an old man and he makes mistakes, as we all do, as bless you, you did. I'm sure I have as well, more than you have. But do you see that narrative has worked with the people that you talk to, that Biden is just this doddery old fool?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, so I think it's fairly clear where my politics lie. Right, Eric, we've spoken a couple of times only, but it's fairly clear where my politics lie. You can imagine the sort of conversations that happen around my dinner table, my breakfast table at home. My daughters are 16 and nearly 13. And we actually were in New York as a family in 2016 during that extraordinary election. And I remember, going up to Times Square and taking them up to Times Square during the early hours of the evening, watching, Hillary's face and Donald's face on the huge billboards in Times Square. Coming back, they went to bed, stayed up all night and watched the election unfold, sitting in front of the TV in our little apartment in the East Village. And, my daughter came out aged, she would have been, 10, little under 9 then, and walked outside and said, he didn't win, did he? And burst into tears when I said, yes, Donald Trump has won, because she'd kind of heard enough and watched enough and was engaged enough in what was going on and said, oh, he's just going to build walls. What's going on? So bear in mind, that is how my children have been raised. They've also been absolutely raised to question everything. And we talk a lot about critical thinking and don't overlook at one source. And unless you feel you've experienced something yourself, don't feel you can talk on the behalf of that and all the rest of it and all these things, I have also going to clearly mess them up, because we all mess all our children up, whether we like it or not. So bearing in mind, this is how they've been raised. Both of them in recent weeks have talked about the fact that Biden is not fit for office. Both of them have talked about the fact, oh, did you see that TikTok where he fell over? And did you see that TikTok where he got all the names wrong? And did you see that Instagram reel where this happened? And on YouTube Shorts, it showed him. They are being bombarded with this stuff. And they are coming from a household where we are so clearly left-leaning, and coming from a European background where even the Democrats here are probably closer to the Tories than to Labour. But this is where they've been raised, and they are being bombarded. Now, these are kids who have not sought out anything political online. These are kids who are definitely not sorting out anything right-leaning online. So this is what's happening, is that I see, they've not seen any reels where Donald Trump calling, Nikki Haley, Nancy Pelosi. They've not talked about, seen any reels where Donald Trump talks about beating Barack Obama in an election, of course, who we never faced, any of this. So there is so much going on out there where younger people are being targeted with this, look at this old man who can't even string a sentence together and you're going to vote for him? Really? So there is a lot that goes on. And we know from listening to, loads. Did you listen to was it The Coming Storm? It was a great podcast all about QAnon and the rise of QAnon.
I know about it. I haven't had a chance to get to it yet.
It's
but yes.
fantastic, but it talks about how there was a concerted effort amongst the right, and I'm to agree, I'm sure the left, I haven't heard, but I'm sure it exists out there, in order to game the algorithm and to push all these things out there. And so for them to have seen all of that and to be sort of laughing and questioning, and of course we then had discussions, and they're very aware of the 91 indictments and the rest of it that Trump is facing. But this is the tip of the iceberg. This is the very beginning of what is going to happen over the next few months. And I agree with you. I'd rather have some, honestly, I wish the Democrats had something else up their sleeves. I think this has been a massive failing of theirs. This is their election to lose, and they still might lose it. And I don't know why there has been this sort of failure to really kind of look at a next level. But where's Kamala? What's happened to her? She's just nowhere. She doesn't seem to be out there. I thought it was fantastic when she and Joe Biden won, and I really had high hopes for what she was going to achieve for the country. And it seems that, I don't know, again, I don't know the machinations of what's been happening politically, but it seems like she's been sort of sidelined and shuffled away a little bit. But I agree with you completely. I would much rather have a slightly forgetful old man than Satan. But a lot of people are going to be pushed that narrative. Whether we like it or not, Trump does appear more engaged, more charismatic, more I can't think of the word someone used today to kind of describe him and his sort of energy. And that's all a lot of people are going to see. And let's not forget, the majority of people don't understand politics. I will add myself into that. But the majority of the electorate do not understand politics. And, it's gone very quiet around here because the gas prices were very high for America, not for England, of course. And everyone's like, look what Biden's doing. Look what Biden's doing. Oh, my gas is nearly $5. This is appalling. Now it's $3.20 a gallon. And everyone's shut up about that. But everyone's now talking about the price of food, which is high, again, higher than England. But, I know that Brexit's really affecting your food prices as well. But the fact is, when the one thing they're moaning about goes away, they move on to the next thing. And that is exactly why, this is how we started our conversation, the Republicans don't want the border crisis in inverted commas to go away, because if it does, they're kind of knackered.
Yeah, I think I do want to say, though, that you compare Donald Trump to the devil there, and the devil would like to disavow that and say that he has nothing to do with Donald Trump, and he has no association whatsoever, just to give him that right of reply, because I doubt he'd want to be tainted with that brush. But I guess that, the broader question that the Democrats are going to face, and I may not have the answer to this, is like, how do they counter that? If that's permeating down to that level, that narrative is there, that he's just this dotery fool who can't tie his own shoes, but without the evidence of the fact that costs are coming down, even if food prices are high, that inflation is falling and that employment is down, that that he passed an infrastructure bill, that all these other things,
the
that
Green
are
New
happening,
Deal, all these things.
Waves has continued to try and lower student loan debt, nearly got a border bill done, but was blocked by Donald Trump. I mean, these are accomplishments that are real with no criminal indictments. So, how does that break through? And that's scary.
I don't understand what the Democrats are doing. And I must say, in the last election, Mark Kelly was actually, going to be a senator, and he was voted in as senator, one of the senators here in Arizona. And I watched the debate between him and a man called Blake Masters, a man who'd previously, he was born and raised in California. He'd kind of parachuted into Arizona to try and become a senator in Arizona. And he was a man who previously had been on tape saying that he thought contraception, not just abortion, but contraception should not be legal. He's a Catholic, as you can probably surmise. And so he was a man with very, very extreme views. He wiped the floor with Mark Kelly in a debate. He absolutely wiped the floor with him. I was so incensed watching it.
Wow.
I very nearly reached out and went, can I please give that man some lessons in how to actually speak on stage and how to talk? Because this was a man who had been literally in space. He was an astronaut. And, his parents were cops. He had everything you do is tick, 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 the American dream. And it just, his wife's head, she had her head half blown off during a crazed right-wing attack when she was a congresswoman down in Tucson. And yet there was just this sort of slightly lackluster, lukewarm approach. Where is the fire? This is what
Mm,
I'm not seeing. Where is the fire in the belly of the Democratic Party? Why aren't senators and governors and congressmen and women standing up and going, "What are you doing, America? Look
yeah.
at this guy. Seriously, open your eyes." But they're not. It's just like, well, let's, there's all this sort of slightly, as I said, lukewarm, lackluster approach to things. That is not going to win the election. The attack ads are coming. And if anyone
Mm,
in England is unaware of how brutal attack ads are in the United States, my eyes still water at the thought of them. As a quick example, the 2020 election, following the murder of George Floyd, of course, in the Black Lives Matter protests, there was lots of calls of defund the police. Now, much
mm,
like something like feminism has been taken and twisted by the right to become anti-man as opposed to equality, defund the police, which I would say the majority of the population didn't understand what that meant. It was like, take all the money away from the police, not actually redistribute that amongst other agencies, which would actually help society more. And actually, let's not put the burden, for example, on the police of caring for people with mental health issues, which
yeah.
I know, having spoken to a lot of police across the world as a broadcaster, they would actually very much welcome.
Mm,
But defund the police became such a kind of uh, just a stick for the Republican Party to beat the Democratic Party with, that there were ads. And one of the ads I remember was an old lady in a house, and it was very dark. I don't know why she
yep.
didn't put the light on. Maybe she had no money because of the terrible democratic economy, which they couldn't blame on the Democrats at that point, but let's not gloss over that.
Yeah.
But there she was in the dark, and she was a little old, sweet little old lady, and we could see a huge figure at the door, a shadowy figure banging on her door, and then a rock or some sort of metal instrument was used, and the window smashed, and she was there terrified as this bad person. I mean, probably a bad hombre, as Donald Trump called them, was trying to
Yep.
get in and hurt her. And so there she was. She picks up the phone, she dials 911, and they go, "Hello. Thanks for calling 911. We haven't got anyone to speak to you at the moment because we've defunded the police. But for murders, press 1. For break-ins, press 2. For sexual assault, press 8." And there was this whole pantomime style skit of what's going to happen under Joe Biden. And then
Yep.
it said, "Oh, please leave a message because we've given all the money to immigrants. So we haven't got time for you. Bye." And it was literally based on no reality whatsoever.
Yep.
Every single thing in the whole ad was bullshit. And I thought, how can they show that? Because none of that is true. It's not
Yeah.
even nuanced. It's not even an opinion. It's a lie. No one
Yep.
is suggesting any of those things. And that ad was shown, I would say, every 15 minutes
Yeah.
for months. For months. And as a Brit watching that and knowing the rules and regulations around our party political broadcasts in the UK,
Yep.
I it just blows my mind. So I know what is coming. I know what is coming. And it worries me that then the sort of more balanced, oh, they go low, we go high. Maybe it's now not the time to go high,
Yeah.
actually, because no one's getting that nuance. No one's understanding the fact you're just basing your arguments on fact. I'm not saying to lie and cheat. Tell the truth.
Mm.
Freaking
But
tell the truth.
do
Don't
it with
gloss over it.
I mean, well, it's because we obviously the speech is so unregulated in the U.S. because of the First Amendment.
Freedom.
Although
Yeah.
the thing I do love about those adverts is because of they all do TV adverts, and they do it like at the congressional level and the state office level, and everyone has a TV advert, and some of the adverts are so batshit crazy. And what you'll see if you didn't see it last time is there's always a round of adverts where usually Republicans blow shit up to demonstrate how they're going to fight regulations. So when Obamacare was a thing, I had a whole playlist on my YouTube channel of the batshit commercials, and it was all like a tank would be pointed at a stack of paper. That's Obamacare. This is what I'm going to do when I get to Washington, D.C. Boom, and then Obamacare explodes, and then they'll go back to the person who's a Senate candidate or whatever with his children, and it's just
Oh, yeah.
beautiful.
It's
It's
beautiful.
batshit crazy and beautiful,
Quite often the
but
children are holding
terrifying.
guns as well. I
Oh, the
remember
Christmas
one,
cards with
the Christmas
the
cards. I
guns.
remember, and I've totally forgotten his name, which is frustrating. But during the last round of election, during the while all the Republicans were And I can't remember if it was the Senate race or the governor race. I think it was the Senate race. And there was one candidate who was an older man who was a kind of titan of industry. You know, he'd made his gazillions in steel or something. And I've totally forgotten his name. And it's really frustrating. But his campaign ad was him. And bear in mind, I'm in Arizona, of course. So the OK Corral is down the road.
Yep.
It was him dressed up in full cowboy gear, walking out of the saloon, the doors swinging. And then in front of him, down the street, was Mark Kelly, who was the Democratic candidate for senator, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden, all dressed as cowboys as well, with their sort of faces, you know, AI'd on, photoshopped on, whatever you want to call it. And he proceeded to do a shootout with the three of them and shoot at them because he's a real American. And I, again, found that utterly extraordinary that his whole campaign is, I'm going to shoot these folks. And everyone was like, yeah, go him. So nothing
I guess
will
when you put
surprise
it
me
that way,
anymore.
it makes sense. A lot of what's going on. I've kept you probably longer than I should have. I just want to ask one last thing before we go. Just briefly, we'll do a Carrie Lake update. So I would imagine, to explain to your UK audience, she's kind of like the Nadine Dorris of America. Would that be a close? What is the equivalent of Carrie Lake in the UK?
I think that's probably the closest. I mean, she was a newsreader on a local TV station for
Yeah.
many, many, many years. I think we've talked about before the fact that I know someone who used to work with her who has told me, you know, that she was a lovely person and she was really fun
But
and
that
sweet.
power.
And then the power, and then essentially, and it sounds kind of reductive to say this, but as she got older and sort of got shoved from the primetime slot to the later slot, um, it's tension. It was a tension. It was like, how do I get more attention? This is their view, and
If
this
she
is
was in
the
the
rabbit
UK,
hole.
she'd be on GB News right now.
Oh, 1,000%. Didn't Nadine have a go on GB News but couldn't read an auto cue from
No,
memory
she's on
serves?
Talk. She's on Talk TV, the Rupert
Oh, is
Murdoch
she?
platform. I don't know if she still has the show or not, but so Carrie, so she lost the governor's race. She contested that she lost the race, said she
Yeah.
didn't, but it kept going. But now she's given up on that, even though she's never conceded, and now she's running as a Republican nominee for Senate.
Is she
In
officially
Arizona.
announced yet? Has she
What?
announced?
That's why I wasn't sure of if
I
she's,
don't
because it's
think she
her and Kristen
has.
Sinema is potential. Well, the deadline hasn't come yet because Kristen Sinema is the current senator or one of the current senators from your state, but she's moved to being an independent. But I think she's got a month from now to file. But she's left the Democratic Party, which is what she won on, and there's a strong Democratic candidate who's, I think, again, I don't, the primary hasn't happened in Arizona, has it? I think you guys are.
No, but Ruben
you want.
Gallagher is you know, Hispanic, Democratic. I mean, he seems to be sort of leading the pack. I couldn't name another, to be honest. But Carrie Lake, I don't believe is announced, and I think Carrie Lake is kind of hoping she won't announce because I think she was really hoping for the VP ticket, even though she's never with Trump. She's she's been there at Mar-a-Lago doing the bloody whatever it's called, you know, the little dances all the time. But then the other day, a couple of weeks ago, Donald Trump did say, I think she'd make a great senator. And I think that really pissed her off because she was very much hoping for that VP ticket. But we'll see. I mean, she was booed recently. So Donald Trump was due to come to Arizona a couple of weeks ago to the Dream City Church, which is in fact about 250 yards from my house, but the other side of a mountain. And he's been there a few times. This is the church that during COVID announced that they have got the anti-COVID machine, which they would wheel in to the church and it would release special this is not I mean, I know you know this, but genuinely anyone listening, this isn't a joke. This is what they look it up. Dream City Church, Phoenix, anti-COVID. They had a machine that they would plug in and it would kill all the COVID, and so you could still go to their church. And they have held quite a lot of freedom rallies. And Trump was due to go to one of them. It's quite near to my daughter's school. And my daughter's school actually closed that day because the principal of the school said, I mean, reading between the lines, it was quite joyful because he went, you know, Mr. Trump, and the fact he didn't call him President Trump really pleased me. Mr. Trump is due to come, and we fear there's going to be lots of crowds of people around the streets, and we just don't really think it's safe for our kids. And you thought, well, there's going to be people there holding AR-15s. You know it that they will be there with their guns. Arizona is an open carry state, so the school was cancelled that day, and then Donald cancelled the night before. Much to the fury of the principal, who sent another brilliant email saying, I'm so sorry for the massive inconvenience this has caused you and my staff and your children, but this seems to be, typical. It was blah. My kids just goes to a regular school, by the way, not a sort of, not private school or anything. But so there are mixed parents there. I will
Mm.
say that. I've seen many bumper stickers in the car park, as many as I've seen sort of, pro Biden stickers. Um, but so he cancelled, but the Freedom Rally went ahead. And Carrie Lake went to the Freedom Rally and was booed
Why?
at the
Just
Freedom Valley. Well, this is a couple of days after she had announced secret footage that she had recorded
ah,
with the leader of the Republican Party here in
in the state.
Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah, where who is it's kind of a non-paid role. It's sort of somebody,
Mm.
it's almost like a figurehead role, isn't it? Of somebody. So they're not a politician, they are somebody who's leading the kind of swivel-eyed loons all together in their little get-togethers. And he was a local businessman who, in fact, was employing Carrie Lake at the time, employing her to do goodness knows what. It's all a bit you scratch my
Wow.
back, I'll scratch yours. And she released these tapes, which she'd recorded secretly, during which she purported that the Republican Party leader had said to her, "Look, if I bung you some cash, don't run for Senate, eh?" She released these tapes with him saying this. He then came out and went, number one, these were recorded completely in private. These were conversations between two friends. These were conversations
Mm.
when I was actually paying her to work for me. They were taken completely out of context. You don't know the rest of the conversation. I wasn't suggesting I'd bung her some money, bribing her not to
Mm.
run. This was actually part of a much bigger conversation about other things. Her party, the Carrie Lake War Room, as they call themselves, because they're so tough. The Carrie Lake War Room turned around and said, I'm totally forgotten his name. I do apologize. But they said, look, mister, we've got loads more on you. We're going to release everything else we have on you if you don't resign. He
Wow.
resigned. And he resigned and said, you know what? I'm resigning just because I don't want this shit in my life. He was like, I don't want this. I don't get paid. I was doing this because I believed in my party. I don't need this. I want to get on with my life. I want to get on with my work, my family. Bye-bye. Now, whether or not you believe him, of course, then if I'm not giving it enough space in my brain. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
But you can believe him or not. But she turned up a couple of days after this. I think she thought she'd get rapturous applause and was actually booed on stage. So we'll have to wait and see whether Carrie's going to have another go or not, whether she believes what the people closest to her are saying or looks at the bigger picture. But, I still really believe reproductive health is going to be a massive issue in this
Mm.
election. Whether the Republicans are going to admit to that or not and keep
Yeah.
banging on about inflation and border, we'll have to see.
Wow. Well, it definitely gives us a reason to touch base with you in a few months' time to find out at least what's happening with Carrie Lake and her journey towards self-destruction of whatever kind. If she can manage to pull us all in there.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
yeah.
but but I really appreciate catching up with you and finding out what's happening because again, that's the whole point is to try and reach across, especially into some place that I don't go very often, which is Arizona, and find out what's happening there and on the front lines of all this stuff. So thank you once again for taking the time to chat to me.
No worries. Good to see you. Yes.
Good to
Stay
see you as
warm.
well. So there we go. That was Sam. Thank you very much to her for coming back on the podcast. Um, again, I think my favorite part of that discussion was asking her like what are people seeing? Like I'm obsessed with politics. I'm watching all these clips of Biden. We're talking to people who are in the room with Biden, who see is he really this, old befuddled man who doesn't know what the hell he's doing? I don't think that's the case. The people I'm talking to say that's not the case, but that's the perception. And she's there and it's permeating through even to her daughters. So the Democrats are going to have a huge lift to convince the American people that this guy can be a viable president again. Even though the other guy on the other side is a sex offender essentially and a rapist and going to be a criminal by the time the election occurs, people are still worried about Biden's cognitive health. Understandably, but just shows you how heavy the lift is. So it's fascinating getting that up close and personal connection to what's happening in the lovely state of Arizona. We're going to try, as we do the podcast, to talk to people in all of the swing states. So we're working on lining up those guests as well. So do make sure that you've subscribed to the podcast. Um, We're on YouTube, of course, now, so you can subscribe there. Give us a review if you're enjoying what we're doing, because that's always a nice lift. And then it lets other people know, people validate these things. That's what we're all about, those little bit of endorphins hitting us. So please feel free to do that if you can. And we'll be back again next week with another exciting guest. So thanks again to Sam, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.